What's up team, my name is Mark and welcome back to Making Instagram Bangers, the series where I teach you all the tips and tricks that I use to shoot and edit my photos. So today a little bit of a different episode, sort of not so much post-processing but more putting the final touches on your photo. Today we're going to be looking at sharpening and noise reduction. Specifically we're going to look at how we took this photo right here, and if we zoom in a little bit, and turn it into this photo right here. As you can see, we've gotten rid of all of the noise and we've made the photo so much sharper. Sharpening is something that I always like to do right at the end of my edit, just to make sure that the image is extra crisp and extra clean before I publish it. So we're going to be looking at two different tools, sharpening and noise reduction, and it's important to learn how to use both because they kind of counteract each other. So you need to understand how they both work in order to get the best results. So without further ado, let's jump right into it. Okay, so we're in Lightroom right now, and this is a photo I took back in Taiwan in February. Now, the issue is this photo was taken at night, and although there's quite a lot of light from the lanterns, I did have to push the ISO up to 1600. Now, whenever you push the ISO up, you are going to introduce more noise, more grain. Now, you can't see it at this size here, but if I zoom in, there's a lot of grain, there's a lot of noise, which is essentially due to the fact that the photo is shot at night and the sensor had to work extra hard to get all that light and information. And today we're going to be looking at how you can get rid of that, but also sharpen your photos. So if we zoom back out and scroll all the way down to the detail panel, we can see there's a bunch of options here. We've got sharpening and noise reduction. Now, if we zoom back in, so if we turn the panel off and on again, you can see that Lightroom already does a pretty good job of getting rid of some of that color noise. You can see all these sort of purple and green tints at the bottom. Lightroom gets rid of all of that. Now, Lightroom doesn't know what you're taking a photo of. It doesn't know what's in your image. And so using the sharpening and noise reduction tools, we're going to help it understand how much detail there is in your photo and how much it can push the noise reduction to get rid of all of that grain. Now, if I zoom back in, what you need to understand is sharpening is defined as the contrast between two pixels. And so if we crank sharpening all the way up, just so I can show you, you can see that it's going to introduce a lot of noise because it just assumes that all of this area here is detail, and therefore it's increasing the contrast between all these different pixels. But because it's actually not detail and it's noise, we're actually adding more noise by sharpening. On the other hand, if we push noise reduction all the way to the max, everything is really smoothed out, but we're losing a lot of detail. So that's why it's important to learn how to use both. Now, I always like to do noise reduction first. That way I can get rid of some of the grain, and that way afterwards, once the grain is gone or I'm happy with the amount of grain, I can then sharpen the image without adding extra noise that was there before, as we just saw. So the easiest way for this is always to zoom into your photo, not too much. I like to go maybe a 4x zoom, something like that, and we can start working our way from there. So the first setting in noise reduction is luminance, and that's basically the amount of noise reduction we're going to apply. If you push it all the way to the max, you'll see that it basically smooths out every single cutout. We've got rid of all the noise, but we've also gotten rid of all the details, so we don't want to do that. So what we're going to do is just hold down the options key and then slowly drag this across until we're comfortable with the amount of noise reduction being applied. Holding down the options key kind of increases the contrast and puts it in black and white, and that way you can get a better idea of what you're dealing with. So I'm going to leave it somewhere around 50. I'm quite happy with that. Okay, so the second setting is detail. Now, detail is, as the name entails, how much detail is in your image. A lower value will get you a smoother result, but less detail, and a higher value means more detail in your image, but might introduce more noise. So again, what we can do is hold down the options key, drag it all the way to the left, and all the way to the right, and kind of look at which one we prefer and work our way from there. So I don't want to lose all the creases in this lantern, so I'm just going to push it somewhere. Probably leave it around where it was, maybe push a little bit further, somewhere like 60. There we go, that'll do. And lastly, contrast. Similarly to detail, this is the amount of contrast there is in your image. So hold down the options key, pull it all the way to the right, all the way to the left, and look at the difference. There's not much difference in here, but for the sake of this video, I'm probably gonna leave it around 50. There we go, I'm happy with that. So if we look at before and after. You can see the image has been really smoothed and we've lost a lot of that grain. That's already looking really good. I'm quite happy with that. Okay, so now that we've removed noise, now we have to sharpen the image. So as I mentioned earlier, sharpening is basically the contrast between two pixels. So if we boost the sharpening all the way to the max, it's adding a lot of contrast between those pixels, and if we push it to 0, there's no contrast at all. So it's all about learning and trying to suss out which one looks best without over sharpening your image. I'm just going to reset it to 40, and again, if you hold down the options key and then pull the amount up, that way you can see what you're doing a little bit better. It just makes it a little bit easier to work with. There we go, somewhere around maybe 68, that'll do. Okay, so the second setting is radius, and radius is the size of the sharpening area around the edges. A radius of 1 means it's only looking at the adjacent pixel. A radius of 3 means it's looking at the 3 adjacent pixels to every pixel. So, bro science aside, basically just hold down the options key and pull the radius all the way to the left and all the way to the right. You'll be able to see the difference in radius being applied. Now, you don't want to push it too up because that means you get these halos around all the lines, which means the sharpening is kind of bleeding around the edges and it's not that precise. So I like to usually leave it between 1 and 1.5, somewhere around maybe, yeah, there we go, 1.5 looks fine to me. Okay, now detail. So detail again is how much detail there is in your image. If you set it to 0, it'll only sharpen the main edge. If you set it to 100, it'll sharpen every single edge it can find, which also means you're introducing noise. So it's all about understanding how much detail there is in your image. So for this image here, it's a lantern. There isn't too much detail going on, but if you were shooting wildlife, for example, animal, cat, whatever, there's going to be a lot of detail and you have to push it up. So in this case, again, I'm just going to hold down the options key, drag it to the left, drag it all the way to the right, and then see which one looks best. Now, if I drag it all the way to the right, I'm introducing a lot more noise, as I can see this, all these weird edges and lines. If I drag it to the left, I'm not really sharpening anymore. So I'm going to put it somewhere around here. I don't want it too high because I know there's not too much detail. Okay, so if we look at the before and the after, we're already looking so much better, especially in these dark areas. It's now really dark and really sharp, as opposed to before where you had all this grain. So we've gotten rid of all of that. It's already looking much better. Now if we zoom out, okay, so last but not least, masking. And this is a super powerful tool. So if you hold down the options key again and put on masking and then pull it to the right, you're gonna start seeing all these lines appear. Effectively, masking is helping Lightroom understand what are actual edges and where it should apply its sharpening. So wherever there's white is where sharpening is applied, and wherever there's black, there's no sharpening being applied at all. So for example here, all these black areas at the top are, well, they're actually darkness, so there shouldn't be any sharpness applied. Because if you're applying sharpness to darkness, you're basically adding noise. So you want to drag the slider until you're happy with all the white lines that are being applied, and you haven't got too much white on areas that you know don't have any detail. So somewhere around here should be fine. And there you go, look at that. So let's look at the before and the after. And if we zoom in specifically, let's have a look at somewhere where there's a lot of detail. There we go, something like that. Before and after. The image is now so much smoother and also so much sharper. We've gotten rid of all that grain that kind of makes your image look a little bit unprofessional and a little bit dirty, and we've just made it extra crisp and extra sharp. So there you go, super easy. Using just a couple of Lightroom adjustments, we've moved the image from this, which had a little bit of noise but still acceptable, into this, which is so much cleaner and so much sharper. Now, what you really need to remember is that Lightroom doesn't understand what you've taken a photo of, and sharpening and noise reduction is basically you telling Lightroom, okay, this is how much detail we've got, this is how much noise we've got, and working with Lightroom to help it understand what's in your image and how much noise reduction and sharpening it can apply safely without ruining your photo. Now, some people like noise or grain in their photo. It gives it sort of retro vibe. I absolutely hate it. I need to get rid of as much noise as I can. I want my photos to be as sharp as I possibly can. And sharpening really is a nice way to add just that, final touch on your photo and really make it stand out, make it look extra crisp and professional. So that's it for the tutorial, guys. Just a quick trick to make your photos look extra sharp, extra professional. If you found any of this useful, if you've learned anything today, please like the video, drop me a comment, let me know what you want to see next. And if you're new to the channel, my name is Mark. I'm a photographer and videographer, and I teach you all the things that I know. So make sure to subscribe, and there'll be a lot more coming soon. In the meantime, stay creative, guys. Take care.